To explain a matter is arbitrary and sometimes even murder. It's a line so potent it slices through the very fabric of modern intellectualism. Because buried in our obsession with theories, frameworks, and bookshelves of borrowed knowledge is a dead soul. We live in a time where we are drowning in explanations, but starving for understanding. Where scholars become high priests, and words become weapons used not to reveal truth, but to bury it under a mountain of sterile clarity. This video is not a biography. It's a warning. Carl Jung's warning. And not the sanitized Jung of motivational Instagram quotes, but the Jung who wandered through the desert of his own soul, who saw visions of madness and death before the First World War erupted, and who whispered something truly terrifying. The desert is within you, it calls, and it breaks all chains. You see, Jung believed that most of what we call knowledge is a defense mechanism, a sophisticated cage made of intellect to protect us from the truth. And the scholars? The so-called custodians of wisdom? He saw them not as sages, but as murderers of meaning. Jung wasn't just being poetic when he wrote, "Have you counted the murderers among the scholars?" He meant it. He had seen firsthand how academia took what was once alive, mystical, raw, terrifying, and dissected it like a corpse under fluorescent lights. He saw ideas turned into dogmas, symbols drained of their soul. He watched men who spoke of God, yet had never touched the divine within themselves. To understand something, Jung said, is a bridge. A living process that leads you toward the path. But to explain it, to reduce it into parts, labels, diagrams, that is to kill the living thing. Think about that. Every time you overanalyze your dream, every time a therapist tries to interpret your soul without walking through their own fire, every time a professor talks of myth without reverence, another murder is committed. Jung saw this as not just a flaw, but a spiritual danger. What you speak, the spirit said to Jung, is madness, but what I speak is the greatness, the intoxication, the undignified, sick, paltry dailiness. Jung wasn't hallucinating. He was receiving a cosmic diagnosis of the modern soul. He realized that we worship the wrong things, not beauty, not truth, but explanation, efficiency, the intoxication of clarity over depth. The world does not need more scholars explaining symbols they've never lived. It needs more people who are willing to be shattered by them. It needs you to stop quoting Jung and start living what he bled to discover. You may think this is dramatic, that we're just playing with words. But Jung was not a man prone to exaggeration. He foresaw the war, he foresaw the flood, and now he is warning you. Truly, I prepare you for solitude. Because if you truly follow this path, you will be alone. You will not find your answers in textbooks, and you will not be understood by those who speak only in borrowed tongues, but you will be free, and that is the only real initiation. The desert is within you, Jung wrote. The desert calls and draws you back, and if you have been in the desert, you begin to understand the voice of the desert. But what is this desert? It's not a metaphor for emptiness. It is a place, a condition of the soul, where all false images are burned away, where the mask of the intellectual, the spiritual seeker, the sophisticated ego, melts under the unbearable light of truth. You may enter it thinking you are wise. You will leave it barely knowing your name. This is the path Jung walked, and it is the path he warned others not to take lightly, because the moment you step into the inner desert, the outer world turns against you. Friends fade. Teachers contradict themselves. Language collapses, and even God refuses to answer in the old ways. Jung called this the death of the hero. And it's not glorious. It's not poetic. It is horrifying, because it strips you of every concept you once used to define yourself. And if you try to explain your way out of it, you will be buried. That's why he feared the scholars. They come into the desert with their pens and formulas and trying to capture the wild wind with graphs. But in the Red Book, Jung makes it clear, what is dead ought not to be resurrected. Your old self must die. Your ideas about what is spiritual must die. Even your image of God must die. Jung divides humanity into two kinds of minds, the explainer and the experiencer, the scholar, and the visionary. The scholar wants control. He needs everything in categories, neatly labeled, measured, systematized. But the visionary, he enters chaos willingly. He makes no promises. He returns with wounds instead of credentials. Jung wrote that it is precisely the people who try to explain everything, who lose the ability to see clearly. They become blind not because they don't have the facts, but because they no longer have faith in vision. They murder the living mystery. They dissect the soul to prove it's not real, and then they wonder why they feel so dead inside. This is the horror Jung witnessed, a world where the visionary is mocked, while the parrot of old ideas is rewarded. A world where gnosis, direct inner knowing, is dismissed as madness. That's why Jung descended into his own madness, because that is where the soul hides. "Do you believe in God?" they asked Jung once. He answered, "I don't believe, I know." But the God Jung knew was not the God of theology, not a father, not a judge. It was a terrifying force, a presence that shattered the ego. In the Red Book, Jung meets this force, and it does not comfort him. It breaks him. He writes, "The God of the ancients is dead, yet the new God has not yet arisen." And in this gap, in this divine silence, the soul wanders the desert. And here's the twist. The scholars don't want this God. Because this God cannot be footnoted, cannot be quoted, cannot be tamed. This God demands sacrifice, not of animals, but of certainty, of image, of security. Carl Jung's warning wasn't about war or politics. It was about intellectual comfort. He saw how the obsession with knowing was killing our ability to experience the numinous, so he wrote down his madness, not to be understood, but to be survived. In the next part, we'll enter the final stage of Jung's message, the great reversal, where what you once trusted becomes dangerous, and what you feared becomes your only salvation. Are you ready to lose your mind to find your soul? What if the thing you feared the most was the key to your redemption? What if the person you tried hardest to silence, the one buried in your unconscious, was the one holding the lantern in your darkest night? Carl Jung called this moment enantiodromia, when everything turns into its opposite, where up becomes down, light hides in shadow, and meaning arises only after total meaninglessness. In the Red Book, Jung reaches the heart of his inner journey, not with understanding, but with surrender. He realizes that his intellect, his education, his entire sense of control was the prison, and to escape, he had to descend. Into filth, into chaos, into madness. He had to embrace what he called the spirit of the depths. A voice that didn't speak in logic, but in symbols, in dreams, in blood and fire. Most people avoid their shadow. They think it's evil, shameful, a mistake. But Jung saw it differently. He said, "The shadow is 90% pure gold." This wasn't metaphor. He meant it literally. Your shadow contains everything your ego had to repress to survive. Your anger, your sexuality, your fear, your God complex, your divine madness. It's all in there, buried, decaying, ignored. And the more you deny it, the more dangerous it becomes. Because what you repress becomes possessed. This is how the scholar becomes the murderer, by believing they are only good. By denying the monster within, they allow it to act in secret. It speaks through theory, through moral righteousness, through detached intellectualism that never touches the soul. Jung warns, the more you try to be the perfect student, the kind soul, the harmless thinker, the more likely you are to become a puppet for the thing you're denying. In one of the most shocking parts of the Red Book, Jung confesses a dark vision. He sees himself killing the hero, a divine figure, a savior. Why? Because the hero had become a tyrant in his psyche, a false god, demanding obedience and control. Jung had to destroy it. He had to become the murderer. But here's what he realized. He didn't become evil. He became whole. This is the deepest warning Jung ever gave. The murderer is not always out there. He is inside you. He is the part of you that wants to destroy what you love, in order to protect what you fear. And if you never meet him, if you never confront the inner murderer, he will act through you. He'll show up in your relationships, in your passive aggression, in your inability to love without control, in your obsession with being right, and your resentment toward the free. This is why Jung said, the unintegrated person is more dangerous than the evil one, because they can't see what they're doing. And worse, they think they're helping. And what happens if you refuse the descent? If you keep playing the game of intellect and reputation? Jung says plainly, you will murder your soul. This is the quiet death happening all around us. It's not dramatic, it's subtle. You keep up appearances, you say all the right things, you live a successful life, but inside, you are hollow. You've become the murderer and the murdered, a ghost of who you might have been. Jung saw this happening in universities, churches, governments. He saw the epidemic of the disembodied intellect. People who had read every book on the soul, but had never listened to their own. That's why he left the institutions. That's why he turned inward, to save his soul, not his status. So now we return to his warning. The murderers are among the scholars, not because they are bad people, but because they forget they are people. They become minds without hearts, hands without bodies, voices without spirit. And that, Jung says, is where true evil hides, not in hatred, but in numbness, in sterile detachment, in the refusal to feel. But it doesn't end there. Jung didn't stop at despair. He believed there was still hope, if we had the courage to look within. In the final part, we will walk through that door, and see what lies beyond the scholar, beyond the murderer, beyond the mind itself. Will you follow? Carl Jung did not end his red book in despair. He ended it in revelation. After descending into madness, after facing the murderer within, after sacrificing the comfort of certainty, he discovered something unexpected, a new self, not the one he had built, not the one approved by society, but the one that had always been hidden beneath it all. He called it the process of individuation, not becoming perfect, not becoming moral, but becoming whole. Jung's final message was not fix the world. It wasn't change the system, fight evil, or convert the masses. That's the ego's war. His message was simpler and more terrifying. Become yourself or be destroyed by who you never were. Most people spend their lives being fragments, a career here, an ideology there, a family role, a borrowed identity. But underneath, they remain strangers to their own soul. Jung says this is spiritual suicide. This is what the murderers do. They kill the soul in the name of order, in the name of pleasing the external gods. But there is another way, a narrow path, a silent one, where no one claps for you, where no one understands you, where you must lose the world, to find the divine seed hidden in your depths. This path is called individuation, and it begins the moment you turn inward, not to escape the world, but to meet it from within. Carl Jung didn't hate scholars. He was one. But he knew that the danger begins when the scholar replaces the mystic, when the person begins to believe that their knowledge is themselves. This is why, in his red book, Jung kills his own mind. He lets it dissolve. He watches as his own beloved theories fall apart, because he knows if he doesn't let go of the false structures, he will never meet the soul beneath them. And when he finally meets that soul, it is not civilized. It is not nice. It is divine, and also monstrous. It is a god and a child, a serpent and a star, a king and a beggar. This is what it means to be whole, to accept all of it, not to choose the light over darkness, but to carry both within you in balance. Jung writes in the Red Book, I must have a dark god in me. A true god is dark and deep. He doesn't mean evil. He means real. He means that the divine is not clean, sterile, or polite. It's raw. It's wild. It speaks in blood and vision. This God is not found in books, not in titles, not in PhDs. It is born in pain, in silence, in the terrifying joy of discovering that you were never who you thought you were. When you find that God within you, you stop trying to fix others, you stop trying to save the world, because you realize you are the world. You are the battlefield. And if you can face the murderer in yourself, you just might redeem it in someone else. So this is the final warning. Not to fear murderers on the outside, but to stop becoming them unconsciously. Every time you choose the easy lie over the difficult truth, you murder something. Every time you silence your soul to gain approval, you murder your future. Every time you cling to ideology, to intellect, to a persona that protects you from feeling, you inch closer to becoming the very thing you hate. Jung saw this in the world. He saw it in himself, and he chose the path few dare to walk. Not the path of righteousness, not of status, but of soul. So if you're still lost, if the world feels like a mask you can't take off, if your mind feels like a trap instead of a guide, you are closer than ever, because the moment you doubt the outer world is the moment the inner one awakens. And when it does, don't run. Listen, it's you, calling from the depths, and you're not here to obey, you're here to remember.